thank you all so much for being here. My name is Jackie Gomez. I am the director for the Office of New and Indigenous Americans with the Mayor's Office. I have the pleasure of helping to be the facilitator and help us keep on track today for our conversation. So we're going to get started with a quick round of introductions. We have quite a packed room, so we'll just ask that you keep it brief, share your name and the organization that you're representing, and I will start to my right.
Hi, I'm Courtney Stone. I am the Director of Communications and Policy for the Nashville Department of Transportation and Multimodal Infrastructure.
Hello, everyone. I'm Keith Durbin. I am the Chief Information Officer and Director of the Information Technology Services Department of Metro.
Pleasure to be here. My name is Sham, rhymes with mom. I run transportation planning for HDR for the Eastern Seaboard. A pleasure to be working with you on this engagement.
Good morning, Amanda Vandegrift, InfoStrategies Consultant on the HDR team.
Good morning, Brad Freeze with the Nashville DOT as Deputy Director.
Good morning, Lydia Benda with WeGo Public Transit.
Good morning, Robbie Hayes with Cumberland Region Tomorrow.
Shelley Hazel with the Nashville Area Chamber.
Good morning, Peter Millett, Meharry Medical College Executive Vice President, Chief Operating Officer, and Professor in Psychiatry.
Hello, I'm Carrie Brumfield, CEO of Senior Ride Nashville.
Good morning, Tomas Yan from Conexión Americas.
Good morning, I'm Vice Mayor Angie Henderson representing the Metro Council.
Good morning, I'm Ed Cole. I serve on the Regional Transportation Authority.
Good morning, I'm Erin Hafkinshill with Think Tennessee.
Good morning, Michael Skipper, Executive Director of the Greater Nashville Regional Council.
Good morning, Wesley Smith with Walk Bike Nashville.
Good morning, Brad Sanderson. I own some of the live music venues on Broadway called The Stage on Broadway, Legends Corner, Second Fiddle, and Hank's Boogie Bar.
Good morning, I'm Amrita Chatterjee with Parks and Greenways Division.
Good morning, I'm Hannah Schaefer with WeGo Public Transit.
Good morning, I'm Carol Westlake with the Tennessee Disability Coalition.
Good morning, Matt Meservey, Planning Director with the Tennessee Department of Transportation.
Good morning, Pete Wooten. I'm the past chair of the Transit Alliance and Moving Forward Initiative and the Greenways for Nashville.
Good morning, I'm Cindy Harrison. I manage the Greenways and Open Space Division for Metro Parks.
Eric Hoke, Design Director, Civic Design Center.
Russ Pulley, just invited to serve on the Community Advisory Committee.
Hi there, I'm Rachel Blackhurst. I'm with NAOP, which is the Commercial Real Estate Development Association.
Good morning, Craig Phillip. I'm a faculty member at Vanderbilt and run our Transportation Research Center.
Good morning, Van Pennock, resident of North Nashville and invited to serve on the committee.
I'm Walter Searcy, former board member of WeGo. Task Force of Nashville Organized for Action and Hope, or known as NOAA. Wonderful. I'm going to ask folks if they want to introduce themselves that are sitting in the back here, too.
Monica Kirsta, Chief Marketing and Communications Officer for WeGo Public Transit.
Good morning, Tracy Ward, President Business Agent, ATU 1235.
Good morning, Felix Gastrola, Director of Planning for WeGo.
And if someone could turn on their mic on that side so we can hopefully hear.
Perfect. Matea Canavino, Transportation Assistant with the Mayor's Office.
Greg Claxton, Nashville Planning. Hannah Davis, Housing Division, Planning Department.
Rochelle Albright, Communications Director for Nashville Planning.
Kendra Abquist, Director of Sustainability and Resilience for the Mayor Cano's office.
Eric Melcher, Public Information Officer for WeGo.
Katie Camises with Metro Planning.
Justin Cole with the Nashville Department of Transportation.
Okay, I saw one other guest join us.
I'm Ashley Northington. I'm the chair of Moving Forward.
Wonderful. And before I hand it over to Michael to introduce himself and kind of kick us off, I want to share that we did make it under time for that. So congratulations and thank you everyone for making a quick introduction. And then I just want to remind everyone that this is an opportunity for us to have a conversation and a dialogue. So I invite everyone to be mindful of creating an open space that's safe, where people feel where they can ask questions if they need something to be clarified. And remember that if you have a question, most likely the person next to you also has a question. This is also very exciting because I know it's the first time that we're bringing both communities together. So thank you all, and I'll pass it over to Michael.
All right, thank you, Jackie. I'm Michael Briggs, Director of Transportation Planning in Mayor O'Connell's office, and it's good to see you all. So I'll echo what Jackie mentioned, that having both groups together I think is a really good opportunity. So excited to bring you all together collaboratively and share what is getting very close to a final draft. And so we'll be talking about next steps at the end of the meeting as well. That also includes an event launch end of next week. So this is our agenda today. Thank you all again for coming early, getting to know one another, because I realize the two groups have kind of been meeting, oftentimes talking about some of the same issues, but in a little bit different format or manner. And so it's just good to kind of bring everybody together and get on the same page as the whole program comes to fruition. I'm going to quickly just go through a brief recap of timeline. And then you all remember we had kind of three areas that were focused on complex topics. It included light rail, some information on financing, and then we also had housing as another topic we needed to dive into. So we're going to do that today with assistance both from the housing division at the planning department, and then we also have our project team members here as well to give some expertise as to how this is handled in some other regions. Then we'll do a recap of the total scope, and then we'll want to get into just some feedback and questions that you all will have after seeing what we've presented today. So really quickly in timeline, this slide has not changed except for the arrow in terms of us moving through this process. So we're still on schedule. But the activities between February and March are kind of cycling through. So as we continue to adjust the program, it impacts finances. And so we are at a hard stop on, I shouldn't say pretty much, we are at a hard stop. I'm like, Sean will come over and like pull me. We are at a hard stop in terms of changes. So everything is locked in. And so we are really excited to present what would be the final program. We're not going to talk about any of the financials with that today. That is something that will be discussed with the event launch. But we will get your input on some financial pieces to help shape some of the messaging in terms of kind of talking about this and how it resonates with Nashvillians. And I think that'll be important to hear your feedback on that. Just a reminder in terms of the rest of the process, it continues to go to council this summer and then has to go over to the election commission in August for early voting in October, and then the referendum being held November 5th. So in terms of updates that we have since we've last met, both as a technical advisory committee and a community advisory committee, we've had an additional listening session with a council member, and then you all have also met. So that ends up being 6 times that we have brought this group together. We're beginning to track now how many touch points we have began taking information either into the community or putting that in front of you all or other groups. And so we're going to continue to track that. The thing is that, and we've talked about this quite a bit, is with this being a program, there's not opportunity to change things with it at this point. So it's more about making sure people understand what is in the program, that they understand how it impacts them, and just setting expectations that this is not a plan that goes out, being a visionary plan that we continue to refine, but this is a set of projects and services that we intend to deliver. And so that's a different sort of process than what we usually have done, where we typically do a planning session. So we'll keep adding to this. The other thing that will be going on is Matea and others in our office have continued to pull together a community engagement plan. So we're continuing to refine that. We'll be doing some training probably at the very end of this month, early into next month, so that everybody has similar talking points, and be equipping others with the same information to go and have conversations on Choose How You Move. So I'm now going to toss it over to our housing team within planning, and we have both Hannah and Greg that are going to present for you all.
Great. Thanks, Michael. Hi, everybody. I'm Hannah Davis. I'm a proud member of the Metro Planning Department and get to work on our policy and innovation with our housing division. We're here today, we're going to review not just the affordable housing, but also market rate housing and the impacts that that has and the interplay with transit. And Greg will take that piece on. So we're going to review the state of affordable housing. I want to show you our housing dashboard, which is a new tool to the city, and then make sure that you're all aware of our programs and initiatives and how you can find this information and be sharing about it as you're out in the community. We have taken on a lot of new work over the last 2 years, so I think it's helpful to make sure that you all are aware of that. When I started this job 5 years ago, I was the only employee at the city working on affordable housing, and now we are very lucky to have a standalone division. It's the first time that staffing and capacity has been institutionalized outside of the mayor's office. So we're a division in the planning department. We were established 2 years ago, and that came out of a recommendation of the 2021 Affordable Housing Task Force. So that was a significant undertaking to help identify what are some of the things that we know we need to do right now, and kind of how should we do them, and how can we be working from a strong set of data as we implement those. And so that has guided our work for the last 2 years. And our team has grown from 3 folks. When we started, we were lucky to recruit a director, Angie Hubbard. She's not able to be here because she's at the ULI conference in New York learning about best practices in our work. But we've grown now to 9 folks in less than 2 years. And so now, we're able to take on a lot more than we were 5 years ago or even 2 years ago as we've grown our capacity and expertise. And the vision that guides our work is that every Nashvilleian has housing security. Something that gets asked about is what is affordable housing? There is a real definition. It's based on the area median income. And affordable housing, for our purposes, means that housing that is under a deed restriction. So, it can't just sell to the market rate tomorrow. That's housing that has subsidy from either the state, the federal, or the local government, and then is protected. Our protections at the Metro side are 30 years. This federal protections typically are 30 years as well. But even as we, push to 30 years, which is the maximum that we're allowed at the state level, we're always looking how can we preserve housing that might be coming out of one of those restrictions as well. This is information that you can find on our housing dashboard, which I'll share. But as you're getting asked about what is affordable housing, I think it's important to share it's housing that is available to folks making below the 80% of the area median income, but also that it's protected. It's not just kind of a nebulous term. It really is something that's received a subsidy and is going to be deed restricted. But then also the takeaway here is that a household could be working 3 full-time jobs and still not be able to afford housing that's the average rent in the Nashville market. So, sometimes people say the term workforce housing. I kind of bristle against that because the data shows us that all of our families, all of our neighbors, are working hard, even if they're not in workforce housing. So folks can be in affordable housing, and typically the research shows us they are working multiple jobs to try to maintain that housing. To frame the conversation, we always try to talk about also the limitations that are available on private development, because I think that helps level set the conversation. So as we're out in the community, currently we are not allowed to tie any entitlement or zoning to affordability. That was a push that was attempted and preempted at the state level. We do not give up those fights, but we are realistic about the state of where we are. We're not able to restrict private sales. So, if someone chooses to sell their home, due to changes in the market, that's not something where we would come in, nor would we want to, but we're not going to come in and block those sales. I think that tends to come up more on the rental side when a rental apartment complex comes up for sale. We can't block those sales, but what we've done, and which I'll showcase in a moment, is to try to be much more active and present and have financing available so that we can participate in those sales. We can't put in rent control, and we can't put in specific tenant protections on private development. Those are all things that are underway on the subsidy side. Anything that we're subsidizing, we want to make sure we have extremely high standards and protections in place for the tenants and for folks who are trying to build their community in those complexes. One thing that I'm really proud of is all of the progress that we've made. So, we're not here just to increase our staff and increase the size of our division. What we want is that it leads to increased impact for Nashville and increased impact for our neighbors. So, in 2021, we were producing about 1,300 units. In 2023, that number is already up to 3,500 units. Our goal, based on the data and what we need, is 5,000 units. Obviously, we wouldn't stop there. We'll continue to push. But that's the 5,000 is kind of our target for what we know we need to be achieving on the creation and production side, preservation side, to make sure that we're kind of maintaining that housing security goal. And one thing I'm very excited to showcase is the housing dashboard. So this housing dashboard was a product of legislation led by Councilmember Berkeley Allen, probably 5, 6, maybe 7 years ago. It took us a while to get there. And where you'll find it is we have a web page on the planning website. If you scroll down, and the reason I'm showing you the behind the scenes is because I hope that you'll take this back to your boards, neighborhood groups. Maybe your social circles are really into like metro happenings, and you can pull this up. So in addition to our tools and kind of our resources, what you'll find here is a dashboard that we work to maintain. We update it on a quarterly basis. And oh, thank you. Oops. Can you assist on changing the screen? That's if we can't pull it up, I'll speak to it. Oh, wow.
Okay,
He's a tech
hopefully
genius.
we can get back to it.
Oh, my gosh. That was incredible. Exactly. Wow. So what we've done here is that we wanted to try to showcase basically, affordable housing is expensive in terms of, the local, state, and federal investment. And we want to show what the city is getting for that investment and the impact it's having on our neighbors. This is really important for us as a division. We really focus on integrity in our work, and that means understanding what we're doing well and what we're not doing well. So if a program is not achieving its goals and we're not seeing the outcomes, then we would want to be able to change direction and make modifications. So first you'll see the state of affordable housing. I think this is a great resource because it showcases the average monthly housing cost for renters, the average monthly housing cost for owners, and then additionally the cost burden numbers for renters and owners, and the housing cost burden by population. It's a great resource for various data points to kind of level set the conversation as you're having out in the community. You can see what the needs are, and then how many units have been funded since FY 2016. Then you'll be able to see all the work that's done by the Barnes Fund. The Barnes Fund is our local housing trust fund. We just passed our 10-year anniversary, and I always try to give kudos to any room I'm speaking to about the Barnes Fund, because that was a product of a lot of community work. So there were probably folks in here who were part of making that tool happen. And I'm talking to municipalities all the time who are trying to set one up now in the midst of a housing crisis. And we're very well positioned to have already had that tool in place ahead of the market pressures that we've seen over the last decade. So here you'll be able to see, sometimes folks will say, oh, that money only goes to rental, or that money only goes to certain, groups, or we've stopped funding it. This is a resource so that you can come on and kind of get that access to that data for yourselves. So you can see the increase in funding over time. You can see what's been completed, what's under construction, and what's in the pre-development phase. And then you can see the partners who are essential as we do this work. The Barnes Fund operates on grants to nonprofits, and so we're only able to achieve this work as much as we have the capacity through our partners. And then you'll see where the affordable housing is located by council district. What you won't see is like an address by address inventory because we wanted to keep privacy for folks. There's some of the funding that's been used to help existing homeowners do rehab on their homes. We wouldn't want them, to then be subject to developers or folks who might be coming in and trying to maybe put pressure on their newly redeveloped homes. And then you'll also see this is a piece that we're developing on an ongoing basis where we're trying to track other programs as well. So we go out and collect as much of that data as we can, especially on the tax credit side, because that funding is certainly the largest funding in terms of the production of affordable housing in Davidson County. That's federal funding. And so we certainly work to track that to see what kind of production that's having. So I'll go back to, wow, it's all working. Wonderful. So as a reminder, that information can all be found at the nashville.gov on the planning website, and you'll find our housing division there. You'll find other resources, but you'll always find that dashboard that you can point folks to. So I'll expect everyone to be tweeting about that dashboard today and see kind of like we might be trending on Twitter later, who can know. Thank you so much, Corey. And then I also want to take the chance to highlight the other work that's underway. The Barnes Housing Trust Fund has certainly been our workhorse. When I started, there was $26 million in that fund. Now there's over $150 million that are put in that fund. It's really an incredible tool that we have as a city. Additionally, we have a priority review process. So if someone's building affordable housing, they kind of go it's intended that they go to the front of the line for any reviews or inspections by Metro departments. That's something that we're consistently reviewing to see the effectiveness of that and then adjustments that we made. But that was passed by Metro Council, and so the departments have been really helpful in kind of adjusting to that prioritization process. Another tool we have is a mixed income pilot. So this is a tool that basically I say we buy down a portion of a new development. So if a developer who doesn't know how to navigate the affordable housing subsidy game just wants to kind of assist in creating new affordable housing, we'll say, hey, you're already going to build that building. If we decrease your property taxes by a bit, can a portion of the building be affordable? And so that process so far has created 466 new units. And something that I think that's helpful there to know is it helps us achieve greater geographic diversity because we're kind of drafting off of the market rather than affordable housing developer having to go find a whole plot of land, which typically limits their geographic access. Another program that I'm proud of is connecting housing to infrastructure. So, we know that folks who live in affordable housing typically have a higher rate of usership on public transit, but also other modes of mobility as well, including pedestrians. And so what we wanted to do was bring state-of-the-art infrastructure around affordable housing developments. And so when a developer is building affordable housing, we kind of come in partnership with NDOT, many thanks to NDOT on this because our team knows nothing about infrastructure, but I say, what would be the Cadillac version of the infrastructure here? And so then we work with the affordability certification, managing that funding funding in project managing it. But then we want to have, the best signals, the best protections, sidewalks, lighting, anything that would go above and beyond what the developer would be required. But that way we know that we're creating long-term health and safety for the neighbors in that affordable housing and for anyone in the surrounding area as well. Another tool is the Catalyst Fund. So this is similar to how I was saying we can't limit private sales. One thing we want to do is make sure that we have funding that's available to be competitive in the marketplace in terms of timing and terms. And so, the Barnes Fund is a deliberative process. It works on a cycle. It's so important. But as a grant process, it operates a little bit more slowly. And that's not how the real estate market works. And so we want something that, if a new investment is announced and an apartment complex suddenly goes up in value and the developer or the owner wants to sell, we want to make sure that affordable housing developers are in the mix in terms of purchasing that and either turning it into affordable housing or maintaining perhaps the kind of natural state of affordability that exists. So very grateful to Metro Council to having put initial $20 million of funding into that. And then we're out right now, we've established the legal structure of that, and then we're out fundraising. So we'll attract additional philanthropic capital and then bank capital, and we'll kind of blend that down so the affordable housing developers will get a more competitive rate, but then they can also come to that fund and be able to close, in 60 and 90 days rather than, the 4 to 6 months, which is typical for the Barnes Fund. And then additionally, something I think that folks should be proud of is that the city, thanks to leadership by mayor's office and council, allocated a little bit over 50% of our Recovery Act funds to housing and homelessness. And so, that is far above what I've seen other municipalities do. We're really grateful to that infusion of capital, especially at a time when we know it's so needed. And so some of that we've programmed to the Catalyst Fund and to Barnes Fund, some of our proven tools, things that we know kind of we need to have. And then we've also gone through the process of working through our various stakeholder groups to say, okay, what would be something we would want to try? And this is, once in a lifetime funding. Those are typically lower price tag items. Obviously, we want to still be really strong stewards of that public funding, but it gives us a chance to try something new that we know could have a benefit to our neighbors. So a couple of those are in process right now, including the cooperative housing model, which I'm really excited about, that I think could help bridge that gap between renting and owning that we see as such a predominant struggle here in town. And then one thing that I think is really important to know is that we have just launched a unified housing strategy. And so what we have is, various plans that have been conducted, including the Affordable Housing Task Force, that have brought us to where we are now. There's also a comprehensive plan that is conducted by MDHA as part of the HUD requirements every year, but we don't have an existing strategy for how all the pieces work together. And then so we've contracted with a consulting group that's really going to help us come in and analyze our current resources and how we are or are not maximizing the value of those, what we need to change in terms of making those work better for our city, and then identifying gaps as well. What do we not have that we need to have, not just on the resource side, but also on the system side. So how can we work better together as, local partners? What gaps do we have on that side? What's working well, and what will we need to improve? So that will be about a 9-month process, and out of that we'll have, a bit of a roadmap going forward so that we know, again, where we need to improve, what we're doing well, and then what we might need to start doing for the first time. So I'll pause here for questions just on my section, though we can do longer questions after Greg's session. The real reason that I have the slide up here is because I wanted a chance to show you all the beautiful affordable housing. So these are all affordable housing developments throughout your city. And sometimes folks say, oh, well, affordable housing doesn't look as good. Sometimes I'll point to places where that has been a lack of funding for maintaining affordable housing. So that is not because of a lack of intention, care, or concern by the developer or the community members that live there. It's that maintenance costs money. And so what we see is a commitment to beautiful design, accessible design, and what we want to know, what we can do as a city is how can we make sure those spaces are maintained for the housing security of the residents there and for the benefit of the community. Any questions? Erin?
Hi, Hannah. Can you talk a little bit about, for the grant funds like the Barnes Fund and the Catalyst Fund that are going towards projects, how you are prioritizing for projects that are near or adjacent to transit corridors?
Oh, good. I'm so glad you asked. Yes. So currently, she's not an audience plant, but so currently all of our programs have a prioritization for access to housing or transit. And so we don't exclusively limit that because we know that folks are coming to us based on the real estate tractions they've been able to put together. And so, we don't want to say, well, we'll only fund that and then we're losing the opportunity to build home ownership, et cetera. But currently all of our programs have a prioritization from it's typically about a quarter of a mile to a high transit corridor. Though we try to be accommodating, for example, one applicant saw an opportunity. It wasn't a high transit corridor, but it was along a bus route. It wasn't an active bus route, but it had just been announced by WeGo. And so we want to be forward looking in addition to knowing we want that density along the corridors as well. One other thing that we're doing as well, and I'll certainly come to here, would be we've also introduced the inclusion of a walk score. So that's something new for us as well. But, something might not be necessarily along a high transit corridor, but it's has a high walk score. And so people might not need to use transit or car or any mobility options as much if they already are embedded in a neighborhood where they're going to have access to those resources. And we know that how important that is for folks living in affordable housing.
Are we talking in terms of your cooperative housing model? Are we talking about multifamily co-ops, or are we talking about individual bungalow style?
Yes, I'm glad you asked. There's a few models of cooperative housing. There's a community land trust model, and that is a model that's folks to use for single-family homeowner or a smaller kind of development style. The one that we funded for this cooperative, because that tool already existed, we wanted to look at something that could be a cooperative for multifamily as well. And so the applicant that we just funded is for a multifamily development. Yes, sir?
Do you have statistics about how many of the units you supported are along transit routes, or maybe are along current transit routes, or the transit routes that would be part of the expanded program? Because that would be a really important way to sell the intersection of the housing and transit, if you've got the stats on that.
Yes. Yeah, Greg and I have been working on that because we also thought the same thing. I think what we see from our data is that in a lot of ways, this expanded network and the increased access on those corridors is really going to benefit residents living in affordable housing because the investments have been being made over the last 10 years to prioritize access to those corridors. So making them work better and increasing the frequency is really going to benefit residents living in affordable housing.
Some maps with that would be really cool as a way to sell it too.
Thanks. Thank you. And as one other note, the federal funding, again, with the tax credits, it also prioritizes access to transit corridors. So most of the federal and local funding is all pushing towards that transit access.
Apparently, WeGo is buying additional land outside of the proposed bus depots around the city. What's the plan for developing affordable housing in those areas?
Mm-hmm. I do think, is that something that you're taking on, Michael? Okay, wonderful. Yeah, I'm excited to hear about that portion because kind of co-location, as we talk about it, or joint development is something we've been thinking about at the city level. How do we build housing on top of a library? How do we make the most of the land we have? And so I do think this is a really exciting opportunity. Do you want, and then Greg, do you want to be conscious of time?
Yeah, sorry, I just have a question. Hannah, I know Amazon, they have their home equity fund, and it's one of the things how they're incentivizing housing affordability is make sure that it's combined with transit. Does the city have some type of strategies maybe to try to incentivize that with other big companies just to play maybe a bigger role into the people that they're bringing into here and the development that they are bringing into the city so they can have more skin in the game for that matter?
Yeah, that's one of the reasons that we started the Catalyst Fund was as there was so much recruitment going on, we knew that there was an opportunity to make an ask, especially the impacts we see that influx has on the housing market. So that's something that we've been kind of going through the new companies and some of our historical legacy companies to make asks to invest in the Catalyst Fund. It's typically hard for them to make like one-off investments. They don't know how to invest in real estate at their level, but by creating the fund, it says, okay, it's going to meet these minimums, and then you can put your money in, and we'll give you a report in addition to your return. So that's one of the strategies for the Catalyst Fund. Mm-hmm. I'll be available for questions, but I do want to be conscious of time, so I want to make sure Greg is able to take over. Thanks. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Anna. Greg Claxton with the Nashville Planning. And so now we're going to shift gears a little bit. So Hannah laid out sort of the programmatic elements of the housing division within the planning department. That is very practical, sort of working with projects, working with programs. We're going to shift gears to something that's a little bit more conceptual because it's a little bit more at arm's length from the direct outcomes. And that's sort of the planning side, the visioning side, and really the regulatory side. And I want to reinforce one of the distinctions that Hannah laid out, which is that from a regulatory perspective, from a zoning perspective, our tools for affordability are very limited. So you're really thinking about kind of where do we allow new housing, how much new housing are we allowing, what can developers build, and that's going to be sort of naturally by its nature, unless it's participating in a subsidy program, kind of tends to be top of market. So just to be aware that that's part of the dynamic that's going on. And so you may know we adopted a general plan a few years ago called Nashville Next that called for kind of managing our growth through connected centers and corridors built on the transit system. We updated in 2017. We're working on a couple of updates now as well. And I want to lay out sort of the logic of kind of why we landed on this strategy of sort of basing our growth around the transit system. Because we think that there's a logic to that and a virtuous cycle that you get when you sort of link housing and transit together. And so generally speaking, your transit service is going to follow your residential density. It's very tough to put transit service out that's going to be successful if there's no one living there. So that's at a starting point. The other thing that tends to follow residential density are services. These may be private services like a grocery store, restaurants, that kind of thing. They want to be where the people are also. Or it may be public services like a park or a library, like the kind of things that people need for their daily lives or kids' activities on the weekends, that sort of thing. Now, once you've got kind of those services, whether it's transit, libraries, parks, grocery stores, whatever else, those then become attractive for other people to locate there as well. And so you kind of have a cycle where residential density follows those services as well. Now, the thing that unlocks the value of all of this from kind of a planning perspective is that the transit service benefits from having those further people locate there. So it's easier to sort of, if you've got service along a road, it's easier to add another bus or expand the service within your existing right-of-way that is not buying an additional lane and building an additional lane and taking down buildings. It's easier to kind of improve the transit service over time so that you've got this positive cycle of a few more people, a little bit better transit service. The transit service makes it easier to accommodate and more attractive for more people to locate there. And so there's kind of a natural cycle there that we want to lean into and support. Now, over the past 10 years, we've kind of been building out this way. The transit service has improved in that time. I think there's been some improvements. There's more room to go. But if I lay out kind of where buildings have been permitted, these are multifamily units just on the market, permitted since 2015. The red circles up here let me see how clearly that is, are the ones that are within kind of the corridor buffer area, the service areas of the sort of major corridors in the transit program. So this is, I mean, the vast majority of the permitted units that we've built over the past 7-8 years have been in areas that are served by transit and that will see improved service through the program. Now, that's not to say that they are receiving sort of the top-notch service that we hope to have right now. Frequency, reliability, and distance, are all still issues. But we've been kind of growing this way already over the past few years. Just to give you a kind of a sense of what that looks like in practice, some of the places you may be familiar with includes Capitol View, just within downtown. Here is kind of the transformation of Division Street from 2015 to 2023. Dickerson Pike, again, the transformation along the Skyliner project. This one is interesting, near Nolensville Pike, near Plaza Mariachi. This is not on Nolensville Pike directly. This is off the corridor. That's important because we only have so many properties on the corridor, but you can see kind of a major transformation here as well. And not just the kind of the building itself, but if you look at the street condition along Welch, you see an upgrade with curb and gutter that improves stormwater management, as well as a sidewalk added on that side. So kind of improving access and walkability for the folks who live past that to get to Nolensville Pike. So that's kind of how we see kind of different pieces fitting together. And then a fair amount of development in Green Hills as well. Just to say that like these are places that we're already seeing development, we're already seeing sort of the transit supportive kind of density that we hope to see happening along our major corridors and in our centers. So as we think about kind of affordability broadly, beyond kind of specific subsidy programs of affordable housing that Hannah was talking about, one starting point is to think about, as we build out the transit system, transportation costs for households living close to transit is lower. So already in Nashville, according to the Center for Neighborhood Technology, their Housing and Transportation Affordability Index, households close to transit in Nashville already spend $200 less per year on transportation. If you look at a city like Denver, which in terms of auto costs is very similar to Nashville, but has been investing for a longer time period in a more robust transit system, households close to transit save more than $700 per year. So that's kind of a big step up. And then to the extent that we can allow kind of a 2-car household to reduce to 1 car or 1 to 0, that can result in huge savings as well if you're making the choice between sort of buying a new car as a replacement versus not. Yeah.
Just curious, how did you determine that the households close to transit were spending less? How did you figure out that statistic?
Sure. So that's the Housing and Transportation Affordability Index, where the Center for Neighborhood Technology has kind of modeled out for cities throughout the country, I think at the block group level, kind of what are the household costs, what are the transportation costs, and then we look to see sort of what their transit access is, how that differs.
So it's modeled?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Then on the housing side, one of the key components is sort of just the ability to build market rate housing as well. We have a shortage of affordable housing. We also have a shortage of market rate housing. And so as we look to align with Nashville Next and build along our centers and corridors, we'd look to allow more housing close to transit, the way that we've been doing, but sort of continuing that process. And so one of the things that we think is pretty key to this is adding the ability to build modestly scaled apartments and townhomes close to transit. These help to reduce the cost of housing in 2 ways. One is that they allow lower land costs compared with a single-family home. Like the cost of land per house, per unit, is very high for single-family homes compared to something that's kind of a few steps up in density. Then on the other hand, they have lower construction costs compared with high-rises in downtown and midtown. So if you think about this very simply, like the structures themselves are more expensive, but if you're building sort of concrete storage for cars in parking garages or underground storage for cars in underground garages, like that is a huge expense compared to no parking or just a kind of a surface lot. I'll also note that this is an area that the council has been very interested in the last few months and passed a resolution, RS 2024-288, that requires planning in concert with NDOT, Metro Water, the Historical Commission, and the Codes Department to structure kind of current regulations and infrastructure capacity to identify obstacles to housing development, with that report required by March 2025. So that is something that we will actively be working on over the next year or so. One thing I want to make kind of wrap up and kind of end on here is that kind of with the addition of the housing team, as we think about sort of the regulatory side and the program side, there's limitations for kind of how those work together, but we think, formally there's limitations in what we can do through regulations, but we think that those are kind of friends that we should be thought of as working cooperatively, even if we can't directly regulate. And so again, if we're aligning with Nashville Next, we'd be looking to allow more housing close to transit. That's something that would help kind of the market provide that housing that we need, but it also would help affordable housing providers. So Hannah mentioned the difficulty that providers sometimes have in finding land. Any reforms that we make that allow more housing close to transit for the private market would help the affordable housing market as well. And what that means is if we can help them contain the cost of land, every dollar of subsidy goes further. So that makes all of the public subsidies that we are rightly proud of making at the local level, at the state level, and at the federal level, each dollar would go further. And then also I want to note that there are other opportunities as well. Metro Land comes up a lot, but Think Tennessee also had a recent report encouraging kind of medical, educational, and faith institutions to kind of build housing on their sites as well. These corridors have many of these sites and many of these opportunities. So even if not every one of those is going to pursue housing on their site, we've got a lot. I think there's been a fair amount of interest in that. It's another opportunity for finding ways to sort of kind of stabilize communities along these transit routes. Do you want to do the HDR piece? Okay. All right. I'll be around for questions as we get into that later on.
All right, so those are both really good overviews, and then I'm also going to look to our project team as well to chime in case I missed something as we go through this. But I really appreciate Hannah talking about really the tools that Metro has available to help address the housing issue. And then Greg's overview, again, of Nashville Next and how transit and housing are linked is really important. And you'll remember we walked through kind of the cascade of a slide that shows as you get more housing that's closer together, you're able to service transit with more reliable and frequent service. So all of that work in saying all that is kind of leading us to the fact that we have a lot of issues that are happening along the corridors, and a lot of our infrastructure and transit services are lagging behind the development that is taking place. And Greg's slides about the multifamily permits really makes a strong case for that. So then how does that begin to get translated into the Choose How You Move program? Because I think there's a tendency for us to look at transit to maybe do a lot of things that it potentially can't do. And so with the Improve Act enabling legislation, we can't carve aside a bucket of money for incentives that just go to affordable housing. Like that is something that can be done in other states or other cities, but the way the legislation is set up here in Nashville, we cannot do that. But there are ways we can build in opportunities to unlock some housing opportunities as transit service begins to expand. And so if we look at the WeGo Essentials component of the Choose How You Move program, there is a key element related to transit centers that can be located with housing opportunities to unlock more opportunities for housing. So there's 12 transit centers that are in Choose How You Move. And when you begin to review the program in more detail in a couple of weeks, you'll see there's different types of transit centers identified. So we have ones that are downtown, intended to be a higher scale, higher density type of development. Also, similarly, able to handle kind of higher density or more frequent service, if we wanted to put it in that same context. Then as you get into neighborhoods, there's neighborhood transit centers that are maybe smaller buildings and handle transit on a little bit smaller scale. And then there's the regional transit centers that are located further away, but there's opportunities for regional service to begin connecting in. And each of those we've been thinking about the transit centers not just being mobility, but also an opportunity to unlock housing. And so the Choose How You Move program factors in about 26 acres of land that could be developed as part of the community benefits portion. And that can include not just housing, but it can also include other community services such as parks and other amenities. Yes, yes. So the key thing, though, is that this ends up being a joint development program. So this slide here, and I'll maybe let Sham and Amanda also chime in to further explain, but it's not just a transit provider that has to come in and set up what would then be kind of a holistic development. Transit's one component of that, and then a partner has to come in and also be able to either provide and co-locate housing or some of the other community services there. Sham, do you want to add anything here?
Sure. First of all, it's a pleasure working with you, and you're already doing so much aggressive work in the housing space. I love seeing the housing tracker and the dashboard, and the numbers are just extraordinary. What Michael's referring to is, as part of the program that's being proposed, is the acquisition of land assets that would be in control of the sponsor entity, that then could be put into the marketplace for the delivery of community amenities, including affordable housing. And so there's a terminology up on the slide which is a little bit wonky. The Federal Transit Administration gives permission to transit properties or transit agencies that have land holdings that aren't being used for the provision of public transit. So these are either pieces of land that may have been once used for construction, or in this case, they might be in the holding of the transit agency. And they can actively then put those into the marketplace and engage with the private development community or the not-for-profit development community on terms that are set by the transit agency, largely, for the delivery of community amenities. And so the way we think about this is that it's a lot of acreage that this plan brings into play that's almost a force multiplier for your existing housing programs that can be put out for solicitation and engagement with the private development community. And then the terms, again, of what it is that's desired from those land assets is subject to the solicitation, meaning you put out your own terms and conditions. There must be XYZ community benefit affiliated with the successful bidder for this property. We believe that the contribution that we're making in terms of land should then be married with the delivery of X% of affordable units when you engage with us. So these will happen on a transaction by transaction basis, but in effect puts skin in the game. It's a nice infusion of land assets. So that's what that term is up top, quote unquote, joint development. But really what it is, it's community development and housing delivery. Is that fair?
Yeah.
Okay.
Great. So then I think we'll stop because we've covered a lot, and it's been a really good overview from the housing division and from planning as well. Good overview as well as to the potential opportunities with Choose How You Move, and take a few questions. Jackie, I'm looking at you in terms of time. Are we still good? Okay. And then I'm going to ask also, because I bet Hannah and Greg will probably have to jump up and answer as well. Are there other questions?
Yeah, I just have a clarifying question, because this came up in our discussion yesterday around, I'm wondering if someone could explain, the issue that came up yesterday is that WeGo doesn't quite have the same authority to buy and condemn land for development that other transit, some of our peer transit agencies have. So just was curious if that, is there, whether there will need to be some changes at the Metro Council level to be able to grant that authority.
We may not know the answer to that, but at Felix or Lydia might.
No, yes, you're right. We do not have that authority. How to work that out? Yeah, we'll probably need to. I don't know the answer to that specifically, whether it could be something that needs to be done through council. I mean, this is a city-wide effort, so I think this will bring other departments and the city's ability into, you know, being a player in that sense. So more conversations will need to happen around that. But I think the the fact that, what the Improve Act restricts us to do, and this is a way to work around some of that and be able to turn it into some of the benefits that we can have out of what we are allowed to do.
That's helpful. Thanks, Felix.
Isn't the distinction based upon the distinction that the state makes between metropolitan governments and local governments versus county governments? County governments have a certain authority that is not granted to metropolitan governments. Isn't that why MTA, WEGO, does not have the condemnation authority and other authorities that sister transit authorities may have?
Are you asking me?
If you dare answer.
I do not know. I was hoping you were affirming that with your legal background, Walter.
I don't know.
Okay. Then I don't feel bad then.
Yes.
Okay.
Other last questions on housing or feedback?
Michael,
Craig?
will you be stipulating or will you be announcing like a number of acres or an aspirational number of acres that you'll be trying to purchase around each of these transit centers, or is that part of the what's kind of a little vaguer, or how are you planning to?
I mean, I think we have to negotiate this on a case-by-case basis, but it is factoring in 26 acres, correct?
I mean, yeah, at current, there's an estimate of the potential acreage around these transit centers that might be acquired, and that number currently is floating around as 26 acres, and might go up or down a little bit, but that's sort of the envelope that it currently is being estimated in the plan.
I think that's really important, that's a meaningful number. I mean, that's a couple of acres per location, so it's not de minimis. I mean, I think that's an important thing to be communicating.
Yeah, good point. We good on time? Okay. One last question on housing.
Yeah. So is the joint development program, is that like what we're saying as part of the transit improvement program, or is that sort of like the outcome of the transit improvement? Like, can we talk about that with the referendum is sort of what I'm asking.
The reason it's mentioned is there's also lots of questions about implementation, right? So after the TIP is approved and enacted, at what point in time, how do we get this done? I brought this up as a mechanism that transit agencies typically use to deliver vertical. So no, this is not specifically enumerated or called out in the TIP. It's not something that will be on the ballot, so to speak, but this is to bring a little bit of a reality to how then agencies in the city or at WEGO, when you sort through the enabling legislation, would actually deliver on this promise of housing.
And I'd use the term, it unlocks the ability to do something like this, which you cannot do today. And it also has the ability to generate revenue, that second bullet there, beyond what we would be assuming in the program.
All right. Thank you to the planning team and housing division and also the project team on this. So appreciate it.
I do have one more question.
Okay. Sorry.
I'm sorry.
Sorry,
this
Hannah.
is back to Greg's presentation about the housing near transit, and I'm just curious about the loosening parking restrictions for housing developments near transit, as anytime you're having land for surface parking, or that increases the land cost, and vertical parking obviously increases construction costs. So I'm curious what's being discussed there.
So for context, all of that is correct. But over the last couple of years, one thing I would note is the council has already sort of started addressing that. So a few years ago, they eliminated parking requirements along kind of our multimodal corridors. And then last year, the year before, eliminated parking requirements within our urban zoning overlay, sort of the historic city of Nashville, and actually shifted those to parking maximums. I think certainly kind of anything that would inhibit sort of housing development from an affordability point of view is something we'd be taking a look at over the next year for that housing infrastructure study. But we've already had like kind of big steps in that regard, particularly from the perspective of the transit program.
And Michael, just so you know, on time, we have about 30 more minutes as a group, so I know you want to go through the scope of Choose How You Move in the next maybe 20, and then we'll have room for questions there.
Got it. All right, well, there we go. And we got the thing to go away at the bottom. I don't know what we're doing. Anyway, all right, so this is, I think, a really exciting thing to start going through because you're going to see stuff that's a bit more polished. There's some edits that we still have to do, some tweaks on things. So just know that some graphics and all may change just a little bit, but we are at a final program, and you will hear a lot more about this on April 19th as well. So just a reminder as to where we started. We kind of started with these big buckets, focusing on sidewalks, signals, service, and safety. It threw out a very wide net of just desires and things we wanted to do as a city, and also improve transit operations, number of capital projects, increase a lot of transportation infrastructure through sidewalk construction, signal upgrades. And so we've really narrowed this in based on the financial envelope and the forecasts going forward. So this is what you will start seeing is the branding for it, Choose How You Move, and some of the color schemes as well. So we're really excited about this to get things kind of packaged up and boards printed and materials out in the community. So you all are seeing some of this other than kind of the internal group for the first time publicly. So just a reminder, we started with Mayor O'Connell launching 3 advisory committees, or 3 transition committees to help advise as he took office around how we grow and how we move and how we work. So the one on how we move set the stage for pursuing the transit referendum then for this fall. Just a reminder, we've talked through, there's been a lot of changes within Nashville, focus on streetcars being operated in the early part of the history, kind of lost some of the multimodal components, big emphasis on driving, and then we've done a lot of planning work. And so we're at this key point in 2024 where we'll need to make a decision to invest in ourselves and proceed forward with dedicated transit funding. Another key thing to remember with this is that the community conversation doesn't end. So after the vote, and you will see there's a lot of projects that are identified, and many of those will have separate conversations related to the challenges, design of the corridors as well. And so just because we take a vote this fall doesn't mean feedback doesn't continue to inform and shape how we deliver the program or the operations of the program. This just recaptures the timeline that was in a bullet point that you all saw at the beginning and have seen throughout the process, just puts it in a graphic form, again, heading towards November 5th referendum. So this begins to build the pieces together of the Transportation Improvement Program, Choose How You Move, with the focus on sidewalks, signals, and safety, tremendous focus on both capital investments and service improvements related to transit service. So those are the 3 blocks that are in the middle. And then some of the issues that we've talked about today related to community equity and belonging and technology as well are significant components of the program. So this is what it breaks out to in terms of percentages of the overall program in those categories, and then what we can deliver in terms of capital projects or operations and service. I'm going to look to Sham and see if there's anything that he wants to specifically highlight because he has a really good way of kind of summarizing some of the key points off of this.
Sure thing. And just I'll try and do a little bit, for those in the back, it's a little bit faint and that's okay.
You think you could turn the lights off for a minute? We might be able to see it better.
Yeah. Go back to school.
Everybody falls asleep.
That might help. Is that a little bit better?
That is a lot better.
I'll try. Let me try and verbalize and follow along the bouncing ball. And as Michael said, some of these slides, we're tweaking some bits and pieces, but the program writ large is put together. So these big components on the sidewalk signals and safety, we're looking at over 86 miles of sidewalk improvements. So these are all the sidewalks, about 54 miles along the high capacity corridors. As well as about 30 miles of additional sidewalks that either are ones that were in the NDOT planned projects that are a half mile from transit, or that are a quarter mile from any of the other TIP improvements. And this also includes an additional like 6 miles of sidewalk improvements that are the extensions of extensions from the network to these logical connections. I think one thing we realize is that this effectively funds all of walk and bike and then some, which is a big deal. So it's a huge investment and an exciting one to make. The second line there are roughly just under 600, 592 is the exact number of signals. These are smarter traffic signals that can be both computer controlled, but then also synchronized and harmonized to help traffic move, whether you're in a personal vehicle or whether you're on a bus. So we've seen these sort of smart signaling systems deployed in places around the globe. It certainly helps the high capacity transit network work, but also helps other traffic move as well, so everyone benefits. A good portion of that is on the high capacity corridor, but almost 400 of them are actually sort of signal upgrades and IT upgrades outside of those big corridors. Street improvements. I think there were some lovely pictures earlier of what happens when development takes place here. Thanks for sharing those pictures, Hannah and Greg, of the street improvements that are so brutally necessary. So about 54 miles of street improvements, definitely along those high capacity corridors, but then sort of different levels. And then finally, the Complete Streets program, which includes somewhere around 39 miles of both high injury network safety improvements as well as 39 miles of bikeways, but also your TMC upgrade, traffic management center upgrades, and then also some bikeways along the high capacity transit corridor. So you have a Complete Streets program that's been developed, that's been nice. You have a very sophisticated assessment of your Vision Zero program and your high injury network. So this sort of funds almost 40 miles of investment along that program. The next big bucket, sort of in the second colored line, you'll see the all access corridors, and this is your high capacity transit backbone. So the transit-specific investments along those corridors to bring you fast, frequent, reliable transit service, and 70% of these corridors will have actually dedicated rights-of-way for transit service, which means those transit vehicles aren't stuck in traffic. They're traveling in their own lane. They're benefiting from the signal program that you saw in that I described in the previous program. They're benefiting from the roadway improvements, and they're also married with pedestrian and bicycle infrastructure adjacent. So that's what's in that all-access corridor, and within that, again, 70% of that mileage is either dedicated right-of-way or it's bus priority. So those vehicles are moving faster. They are getting either the dedicated lane they need, or in some cases they're moving around traffic via signalization or street elements that help them bypass traffic. Then we go purple. It does look purple-ish to those of us who are on this side of the room. Perhaps it still looks purple towards the end out of the room. But massive amounts of bus stop upgrades, almost 300 bus stop upgrades. We need dignified, safe, climate-protected shelters for people who want to take transit. So making those upgrades to the bus stops and bus shelters. You'll see that second line, what that says is transit centers. And these are places where individuals can essentially both board transit, but also make a mode change. So they can switch from biking or walking, perhaps charge their e-bike or drop off their e-bike and switch onto a transit vehicle. Some of these are going to be adjacent to park and ride lots. So you can make that mode shift and get onto transit. There's also, these are envisioned to have some level of vertical builds as well. So these are amenitized buildings that may have customer conveniences. In some places, we may see some, not only the opportunity to purchase or reload fare, but also bathrooms and break rooms, et cetera, and these are also the places that will be located adjacent to those 2 to 3 acres we discussed earlier for the opportunity for housing and community benefits. Those transit centers are located in about 19 park and rides as well.
Hey, Sham,
These are, yes.
I'll just add, sorry to interrupt, I'll just add the transit centers also provide an opportunity to start decentralizing our reliance on downtown. And these are going to be facilities that are going to allow for better connections outside of downtown and just start integrating our network better on the peripheries.
No, continuing on, we are programmed to replace the aging Nestor garage, which is definitely in need of both rehabilitation and replacement in order to maintain the service you have, but then also an additional garage. What happens when you add service, you need more vehicles to run that service, and those vehicles need to have both a home and a hospital, so to speak. So there's a relief garage that's programmed in here as well, and then the additional vehicles to run just a significant increase in service that we're programming in. So let's go to the next line here, which is the service improvements. It's delightful to see such a huge investment in service that's being programmed here, almost effectively a doubling, if not more, of total revenue hours. So real investment in the service, right? That's a super important piece. So we're looking at, in that, I guess that second purple line, dozens and dozens of routes that will either be upgraded in terms of span of service, in some cases 24/7, in some cases additional frequency, going to 15 minutes or better or 10 minutes or better. There are certain places in the core of the network where so many different lines will intersect that you may experience a vehicle every 2 to 3 minutes. So that's a nice enhancement there. So almost, again, a doubling in service from current levels. And then at the bottom there, you can see that we talked earlier about this investment in both land adjacent to the transit centers for potential community benefit, including affordable housing, as Amanda said, to unlock the power of the land market to deliver housing. But there's also attention placed to make sure that there are resources for businesses along the corridors to maintain continuity of operation during the construction period of some of these transit corridors. But there's resources in place to be very cognizant and forthright about anti-displacement to make sure that those who live there today can continue to do so and will be helped to continue to do so for generations to come. Resources for community aesthetic benefits, including public art, and ensuring that we also have technology-enabled safety systems for the transit centers, for the vehicles, and that is part of the innovation and technology component as well. We want to make sure that WeGo Link, which is essentially, you can summon transit to connect you to the transit network. It's a popular amenity that's being offered right now. To expand that to other parts of the county that will be now touched by the expanded network, so a significant expansion there. On-demand and real-time safety and safety monitoring for the entire network. And then, interestingly, an investment in your fare systems so that you can actually have the type of modernized, integrated, technology-enabled fare system that will enable you to do things like perhaps have different fare products, friends and family discounts. I know that your Quick Tick is definitely an advent in the right direction, but to move to an account-based fare system allows us to move the fare system into the modern age. So that, Michael, was sort of the 4-minute and 30-second drill. Hopefully that was okay.
Perfect.
Great.
Yeah, thank you. And then I'll just quickly show what this looks like graphically. You've seen versions of this as we've continued to modify it that has draft all over it. So it's some of the same information that Sham just talked us through. So this is focusing on sidewalk signals, streets, and safety. And really a key talking point is that this really equips our corridors not only that have transit, but also some that are off what we would consider being our main transit corridors. So as transit centers come online, and similar to the Rip Patton Center, service can shift and it easily work into the system by having upgraded signal technology. Also gets us up to the county line on many of the corridors. So as other counties begin looking at how to participate in either transit service regionally or trying to tie into signal technology, there's the ability to integrate there. This graphically shows then the all-access corridors. What has happened over time as we've continued the conversation is that we've collapsed the different services that were identified, focused on bus rapid transit, priority service, and rapid bus, because we realize that's not, those are kind of terms of art. They take a lot of explanation. So we're trying to address that issue to really say we're going to focus on some of these key corridors and improve the reliability and frequency of the service, because that's what's really important is the outcome. The other issue that we're trying to address is that we don't have enough information at this point to say on all the corridors from here to here will be dedicated lanes. So it leaves the conversation open as we get into preliminary engineering to be flexible and really have more of a community conversation around those needs going forward. You all have seen this. I don't know that there's a whole lot more to add on this slide, other than it depicts some of the bus stop enhancements, the 12 transit centers and park and ride facilities, and the 2 garages. Now this, I think, as we get information kind of layered in into an interactive GIS, people will probably want to kind of poke around on a map like this and see how things adjust. So this just shows graphically the whole impact of the different levels of operations. Really the big point is that we're greatly enhancing service compared to today. You've also seen a little bit on this slide as well. So this is getting at the 26 acres of land as part of the transit centers. And Sean, also, what else should we point out with this bucket?
Yeah, that the investments in making sure that, for example, the investments in a business continuity fund, for example, that are proposed here, and there's some peculiarities about like the color of money and what funding source, but we want to make sure that we've been thoughtful about making sure, we want to be sure that we're thoughtful about making sure businesses can stay in business during construction, helping existing residents stay where they live. So this term of art in the industry, they call it anti-displacement. So you can be very proactive about that as part of the program and part of the construction. So that's included in this thoughtfulness. Public art as part of these transit center investments. So there's a host of these other programmatic things that are envisioned in our community benefit and belonging component of the TIP.
Okay, and then the final slide is related to innovation and technology. I think we were talking about this. This probably paints a bigger picture. There's a lot of pink, purple, or gray, depending on what you're looking at. But the idea is to expand the current WeGo link service and make that countywide as an option. There's also fare enhancements. Sean was talking about accounts. So beginning to integrate technology more into the service. So that's the big buckets, the colorful slides. I've got a few more slides as to how we talk about some of the financial pieces that I would like to get to as well. But I want to stop and see if you've got questions about what we've presented in terms of the components. Yes, Craig.
This looks awesome, and really a maturing of everything you've done, but especially on the chart that had the percentages. It really raised my anxiety that you would have that thing near the bottom called community equity and belonging, and then listing 1%. I mean, the whole program is built around being equitable and belonging and including, and to label that as equity, and I've got 1% of my stuff like, oh, by the way, I'm doing that too. I think that label is wrong. use the word equity for that, because so many facets of the plan are equity driven. So that's my only real reaction was that labeling and saying that's 1% of the program doesn't feel right. In fact, I think it's going to raise a lot of opposition, saying, oh, you got to focus on equity, and you are. The whole plan is focused on that, in my judgment. So anyway, that's my.
Good point.
Michael, just a time check. We have 9 minutes. So I don't know if you want to.
Okay. Michael, Skipper, and then I think it's all Brad and then Pete.
Thank you, Michael. A great job with the presentation. I think there's a lot more we'll talk about with respect to the program of projects that's being proposed. But rewinding back to our first conversation where we noted the importance of talking about this as part of an even more comprehensive set of projects to improve transportation across the county. There's a lot more happening than just this program of projects. And you may not have an answer yet, but to what extent have you started thinking about how this would be presented as a subset of a much larger set of projects that are scheduled over the next 5 to 25 years?
Yeah, we've talked about it. I'm kind of looking at our communications folks because this keeps coming up, and I think we do need to do some work in how we present just existing, ongoing capital programs. So Walk and Bike has a lot of stuff that's underway, so this is intended to add to that. It's also intended to add to what WeGo is currently doing, and then at some point kind of shift a little bit off of the current way service is funded, but not completely stray away from that either. Courtney, did you want to add?
I feel a little bit like a broken record on this because I keep saying, and Sham used the terminology force multiplier, but this really does act as a force multiplier for example, for sidewalks. What we're able to do in the future is expanded pretty dramatically in terms of building out our sidewalk network because we would have this set of projects already identified. We're able then through a capital spending process or whatever Metro Council allocates to us to build sidewalks that might not be as close to the transit lines, that might be a little deeper into the neighborhood. So we're able to do more just over a shorter period of time. It really compresses the build out for our Walk and Bike program.
So I think we'll continue to work on that is the point. I know all of this is kind of coming together quickly, so we're going to take a moment to kind of sit back and reflect on what we need to communicate with this information.
I just had a thing to this question. I think it'd be really helpful to say Walk and Bike, what percentage of complete streets go to Walk and Bike and what percentage of sidewalks, so that we could say you, as part of this plan, you're voting on building out the network. So I think I like what you're saying.
Yeah, and I'll say, it's true of sidewalks, but sidewalks is just one example, and it's an easy one that we can talk about, but it's true of the signals piece, it's true of the complete streets components, it's true of bikeways. There are a lot of improvements that, like you were saying, Michael, are planned, are ongoing, will happen over the next 1 year, 5 years, 10 years, that aren't accounted for in this program, but this program is going to help expedite the build out of.
Can we shift over to Brad, because unless you had something specifically on this? Just want to make sure.
I think it is a little bit on this and just how things are presented and spoken about, to your point about kind of the 1% at the bottom. And I feel like in some regard we've swapped out high frequency network, kind of our internal lingo for just some other lingo, like all access corridor, WeGo essentials. I think there needs to be some kind of workshopping of how these are presented and explained. Absolutely, sidewalks, signals, safety, like that kind of alliterative front loading of that is I think very important and clear to community members, and making that a top line I think is very important, to your point about force multiplying and how it works in the larger context. But I would encourage us, high capacity transit corridors, all access corridors, the WeGo essentials, the enhancer. It is more about kind of frequency, what it means for people's experience. And I do worry about kind of just this 1% at the bottom, whereas, you've broken out some really important things, kind of hidden the lead in some sections, and then in others, there's not the breakout that maybe is needed around, the countywide WeGo link or the fare systems and some of those things that I think are, you do want to elevate, even though the percentage might be small, but it's just kind of in how you're organizing, how you're communicating about it. I think we'll need a good amount of feedback and work. Thank you.
Okay.
Michael.
Thank you. Brad over here had something, unless it's specifically building on that one. That comment.
Yeah, I'll add. Actually, what I was going to ask kind of goes along with these last several discussions here. I noticed your sidewalk signal service and safety. That sounds like what came out of the Downtown Connect project, or at least a lot of those concepts. And in recent MDOT meetings, sounds like that's kind of what they were labeling as priority one. I guess that's the low-hanging fruit of, better traffic, smart traffic signals, better sidewalks, and those sort of things. So now I'm starting to get the waters muddy here. I was under the impression that NDOT was already moving forward with some of those aspects this year. Is there a bigger picture here, some things that are and are not dependent on the referendum?
I'm looking at the NDOT staff. Justin, do you have ability to answer that?
Yeah, I mean, I think like Courtney said, it's an accelerator for the implementation. So, we're going to be able to do more with this faster than we can just with the current funding that we have through CSPs. So, yes, we are, several of the projects in here in all categories are ones that we're already advancing, which we actually think is a really good thing, and that it means we can hit the ground running if we have this new revenue. But yeah, it is an accelerator, so you will see overlap. We're pulling projects from some of those things, but we're going to be able to move faster with them.
And I'll say, with the example of Connect Downtown, that is a program, that is a plan that we intend to move forward with regardless of the outcome of any other funding sources being identified or a referendum. So Connect Downtown, the low-hanging fruit that you mentioned, the next 1 to 2 to 3 years, we do intend to move forward with those programs regardless of any other outcomes.
Pete had a question, and then get over here.
Just one comment. One of the principal, challenges in the WeGo system, has been the hub and spoke construction, right, of the system. And in conversations with riders in the past, they talked about the challenge of getting from one place in South Nashville to another place by virtue of having to go downtown, and just the duration of the commute. The transit centers, it sounds like, will change that routing, so we have some more kind of cross routing that it's occurring across the spokes. And so I guess and I saw that chart, I was trying to get a visual read on how many of those linkages we've got, but that's a point of emphasis, I think, that we really want to use a megaphone for, just because it's such a fundamental challenge for folks. And then also talking about duration of commute. So if you're going from here to here, what was the commute time prior to this change, and what will it be with the changes? I think that could be a great selling point. And maybe that's data you've already got. But
this is all helpful to how we present this, so thank you.
Hey, Michael, we're at 11:59, so I don't know if you want to give a little bit of next steps.
Van had one thing, Kenya had one, and then Aaron, and then we'll have to stop.
All right. So I'm quick. This has been a very good technical discussion, but when do we get to the part where we're interpreting what we heard today? And can you talk about the steps to the communication part of this, and whether the community people will be involved in that, and so on?
Yeah, so we will have an event launch on April 19th at the Southeast Community Center. So the mayor will present the program. We are, and this has not gotten on your calendars yet, we are hoping to bring you all back together immediately after that to have a briefing. I think one thing that we could benefit from in that discussion is maybe to workshop a few things during that. is I actually have a couple of slides that I was hoping to get feedback from you all as to how things begin to resonate with the average person. So I think we could dive into that as well. So after the 19th, there'll be training sessions that we'll be doing towards the end of this month into early May to equip everyone with the same messaging, same information. We are starting to schedule transit talks, so there's some that are already happening at the end of April and getting into May, and we're beginning to pull together the whole list of presenters for that.
When are we going to audit?
Let's see, audit. So when we actually hand it over to State Comptroller.
It has already been handed over, and it's being reviewed right now.
What day?
We will hear on May 31st.
No, I'm saying, oh, you will hear back on May 31st.
Confirmation on May 31st.
Kenya.
Madam Vice Mayor actually was able to include my question into what she asked, so I'm
Okay.
good.
Okay. And then last question from Aaron.
I get the last word. I can't believe you letting me do that, Michael. So I just have one super quick clarifying question just about the free fare program. I think the last time we met and talked, it was included in the community and belonging section, but it seems like that may have fallen off. So just want to make sure that we're talking about that quite a bit and including that in the conversation. And then maybe this is adding on to the Vice Mayor's comments about the terminology. I definitely am a little bit nervous about the move away from the BRT terminology, and I heard the mention of the sort of 70% dedicated lanes. Believe me, I understand the need to have flexibility in the plan and that there's a lot more engineering that needs to be done, but I think it's really important for us to be clear that political will and community will is a big part of those conversations. It's not just about engineering, and I think having a commitment to a really high-quality BRT program is really important for the success of this project, and of course has a direct link to the kind of quality service we'll be able to provide and the ridership increases that we'll see.
All right, Sham, can you speak to the fare program?
Yeah, regarding fares, I did not mean to inadvertently omit the free and reduced fare program. I was maybe speaking about some of the benefits that could be funded through that, and you're right, that has not migrated out. And then agreed that making sure that, so in the work that we conducted with your excellent staff already, this is a very robust BRT program along the high-capacity transit corridors, and the only places where there may be anything other than the dedicated lanes are being governed by the laws of physics and the desire to not evict an existing, remove an existing occupied building. So we've pushed the laws of physics. We haven't done the conceptual engineering yet, so maybe that number goes up. But at least at the concept planning phase and at the vision planning phase, this is what the laws of physics will allow us to deliver in terms of those dedicated lanes. I do love the idea of pushing the messaging on the capacity, the frequency, the reliability, and the benefit of the community, which is also what we'll have to do in the campaign.
Yeah, I just think that, the experience we've seen in other cities is that number doesn't usually go up, it usually goes down. So I think starting at the higher level is really important from a political will perspective.
Yeah, good point. All right, I want to thank you all because this kind of ends, I think, a lot of the major discussion that we've had around the Transportation Improvement Program. One of the things, though, that I want to ensure is that the Community Advisory Committee, potentially having them continue to meet on as we get into the summer and be a sounding board as we begin to hear things back, because you all have given us really good feedback, and I think we'll continue to hear ways that we can refine how we communicate that. And so I'd like to potentially start either adding a few people to that, because some people have reached out about trying to participate in the community advisory process, but then have that portion of our work continue to meet as we go into November.
We need more bus riders.
So,
We need
okay.
more bus riders.
Gotcha. Quick reminder then, on April 19th is the event launch, so that's at the Southeast Community Center at 10:30. The other thing that's in terms of next steps is we are trying to do a detailed presentation with Metro Council members. So that would be a meeting with the Transportation and Infrastructure Subcommittee that would then be opened up to all council members. We're looking at, I believe it's the last week of April to do that, but the date has not been set. And we will have like a whole team of folks there to help us answer questions and dive in to details within each council district as well.
What's the address of the Southeast Community Center?
Courtney's going to tell us really quickly. So it's the old Hickory Hollow Mall, yeah, Global Mall.
5260 Hickory Hollow Parkway,
There you go.
number
Okay.
202.
Yes. Do that. That's amazing. So, okay. All right. Thank you all again. Appreciate you all meeting here today. Have a good day.
This has been a service of the Metro Nashville Network. If you would like to see this presentation again, or for more information on this and other programs, visit nashville.gov.